and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I'm associate editor at Fine Gardening Magazine.
Hey, I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the executive editor. You guys know us. You have coffee with us on every Friday morning or every other Friday morning. We're having coffee today and we're talking about, Carol, what are we talking about?
Great native grasses.
Woohoo! You guys get so excited when we do native plant episodes. So here you go. We're giving what you want. It's fall here, late fall. Very late fall. Like I'm waiting for the flakes to fly here in Connecticut, but the grasses are looking amazing, just absolutely beautiful. And there was no shortage of options today, Carol. Did you find the same?
I did, but I find also that I talk about native grasses kind of a lot because I was like, already talked about that one. So I found some that I haven't talked about ad nauseum.
Okay, nice.
How about you?
Well, you know what? I discovered that, I don't have a ton of grasses in my garden. And what I do have, it's been through trial and error. So I just have a bunch of that same grass because, hey, it works. Let's go for it and divide it up and spread it around. But I did end up throwing one into the mix that I don't have that I really want. So I've got 3, I think, that do appear in my garden, and then one that's just a wish list plant. So, well, let's kick it off. What started your native grasses list?
So it's full confession, this is not really a grass. So I thought I would start with that one and get it out of the way, but it's grass-like. So my first one is Pennsylvania sedge, and that's Carex pennsylvanica. Hardy from zones 4 to 8, super big hardiness range. Also a super large native range in the eastern U.S. and into Canada. It's like pretty much the whole eastern U.S. and part of Canada. This is its native range. So a lot of people can grow it and call it native, but you can't call it a grass because that thing, sedges have edges, grasses are round.
No. I mean, geez Louise, it's a grass. I mean, every design, I feel like I have like a designer's brain when I approach plants. And if it's bladed and it's grassy, it's a grass. So You're in.
That's
I'm not throwing a flag.
I thought so. And it functions like a grass, but it does things in the landscape that some of these other grasses can't really do. So that for starters, it stays small. So it gets 8 to 12 inches tall and wide, with the caveat that a single plant, a single division can spread to cover an area that's 4 to 5 feet in diameter in the course of about 4 or 5 years. So it's like very useful for a ground cover. And the other thing that's cool about it is that it can take full sun to full shade. So it's great for those transitional areas, but like pretty much anywhere that you need a nice grassy ground cover, it'll do the trick. Not really fussy about soil. Dry to average soil is its main jam. And it's just got this beautiful texture. It has very fine blades. It's got a beautiful grassy green color. Insignificant flowers. Those happen in early spring. That's something that makes it different than a lot of the ornamental grasses that we're used to that bloom in late summer or autumn. It's loose. It's informal. It could go. You put it around the base of trees. It looks great. You can sort of skirt larger perennials and, keep the weeds down. It can even be a lawn alternative. Although it's not the kind of lawn that you would like play soccer with the kids on or like turn the dog loose on every single day. Because it has, those leaves can get quite long. Those grassy leaves can get quite long. So it's going to sort of have a loftier texture than your typical lawn. Mount Cuba Center has recently done a trial of native sedges. and they tested this did very well. It was one of their top performers, and they tested some of these caryxes as for their mowability. Like, can you mow it like a regular lawn? And this one scored quite well. Pennsylvania sedge can be mowed. And the only thing that makes it sort of less than ideal as a lawn is that it's sort of got a looser habit. So you might have some bare spots in your lawn that opportunistic weeds might take hold. And so it's a lawn that you would have to sort of go in and weed every so often. But it did very well in the mowing trial, but it wasn't the top performer in the mowing trial. If you want a really good mobile carex, they say Carex woodii, it got top scores in both sun and shade for a mowable Carex. But for just an all-around cool grassy texture, I love it. I love this Pennsylvania sedge.
That's amazing. I don't know what photo you might have pulled to put on the show notes because I haven't gone in there and peeked. But recently I was poking around our plant database and there was a photo of this Carex pennsylvanica. And it was so beautiful because the green is just like this glowing, like gorgeous green. And I didn't know if it was the light, but it was a field of this Carex pennsylvanica. And I thought, oh, I just want to roll around in it. Like, it just looks so soft and beautiful, like this sea of green, that it was very alluring, I will say, very alluring. And I love the fact that you were talking about, like, it's conditionally got a very wide range, which I think is so key to get, if you're going to do like a no mulch garden where you've got this understory of ground cover that you want this consistency through your bed. That's a great design tip. Great design tip. Bravo, bravo. And it's a grass. Gosh darn it. Now, I'm allowing you to do this because my next grass is not actually a grass, apparently. So I did the same thing. I'm just going to get it out of the way. I picked blue-eyed grass. I mean, geez, it's got grass in the name. And that's Sisyrinchium angustifolium, zones 4 to 9, 1 foot tall, 1 foot wide. This is actually in the iris family. And when you see this adorable blue bladed grass bloom, you kind of get it because it does have these adorable, smaller than a dime sized blue flowers that have, I think, 5 little individual petals to it and a darling little yellow center. And, this blue-eyed grass starts blooming in early May. For us here on the East Coast, it goes all the way in and through June. This is an Eastern and Midwestern North American native. So same thing, kind of in that swath, a little bit into Canada. So a big chunk of the Eastern half of North America. I just love it. It's full sun, well-drained soil. So, if you've got those areas that are just, kind of the hell strips of the garden, this grass will do very well there. I already said that even though it's thought of and people design with it as a grass, it is actually in the iris family. It self-seeds freely if you let it go to seed, if you don't deadhead it, but it's not obnoxious. You're not pulling these seedlings all out of your garden. It kind of just drops seed around itself. And so you end up with these kind of rhizomatic clumps that just slowly expand out. And you can divide this, which is what I love in my garden. I wish I made $1 million and I could buy plants willy-nilly, but I don't. So I look for plants that, over 2 or 3 years, I can divide them and then kind of spread them out and get that, that really nice massing look without spending, $20 per 1 gallon perennial. So every 2 to 3 years, blue-eyed grass divides up really, really nicely. The thing that I love about this grass is if you drive up and down 95 on the eastern seaboard, you look on the side of the highway, in May and June, you will actually see this grass blooming. And that's the thing about native grasses, regardless of where you are in North America, a lot of these grasses will seed themselves into disturbed soil areas. You know, they're very, very adept to, hey, when the bulldozer comes through and scrapes away all the topsoil and leaves all the lean, gravelly loam behind, these grasses will seed in there. So it's rather funny that, you know, I went out and bought a grass from a nursery that I know you're not supposed to, but I literally could have dug up on the side of the highway. It just cracks me up. But blue-eyed grass is just, oh, it's just so beautiful. And there are versions of this Sisyrinchium that are Western. There's a Western blue-eyed grass, and I believe that there's a Southwestern species as well. So, you know, if this particular, you know, Sisyrinchium angustifolium isn't your native, there's a version of this grass / iris that would grow anywhere and could be your native that's in your backyard. But love this. And it pulls on my heartstrings too, because in our old office before we moved into our current offices, there was a beautiful patch of this that was just outside the parking lot. So it was in that sea of asphalt. There was this really pretty little patch of blue-eyed grass that would just make me happy every May and June. Carol, do you have blue-eyed grass? I feel like this is something that you might have in your garden.
Oh, I would love to have blue-eyed grass. My grandparents had a hay field where it would occasionally just randomly come up, and it was so, I would go out and visit it. I wouldn't pick it because there were so few of them, but I would like visit it every day when I'd be, you know, visiting my grandparents. Yeah, it's such a cool plant. It seemed like such a miracle to me when I was a little child that this grass was flowering, and now I understand why.
Well, listen, you're always giving me plants. I feel like this upcoming spring, I will cleave off a section of it for you so you can have a blue-eyed grass.
Oh, I would love that. That would be so cool.
All right. What's next on your native grasses list?
All right. This one, you know, there's a term in journalism when something comes over the transom, like,
Yep.
you know, an unexpected, you know, piece of information or whatever. So I was writing the script for this episode, and my friend knocked on my door, and she was holding a bag with 3 little baby grasses in it. And I was like, okay, this is a message from the universe that this particular grass has got to get into this episode. So
Nice.
what my friend was bringing me was rose muhly. That's Muhlenbergia reverconii. Some people also call it seep muhly because it grows in seeps in its native habitat. But this is a muhly grass that is hardy from zones 5 to 9. And it gets about 2 to 3 feet tall, about 2 feet wide. It likes full sun. Full sun is a must if you want it to do its thing with the flowering. Dry to moderately moist, well-drained soil, but not too fussy about the soil. It tolerates heat, it tolerates humidity, drought, but it will do better. It will look better and flower better if it has consistent moisture. Again, it would love to be growing on a seep in central Oklahoma or the central Texas. That's where it's from. And yes, it loves regular moisture, but it can live without it. It's got this super fine, almost hair-like texture. And it makes a mound of basal foliage that, again, it's about 2 feet tall, wide. And then when it flowers, the flowers sort of float above it and make it 3 feet tall. And it's those flowers, that's why you grow muhly grass, right? In late August or early to late August, a cloud of misty pink flowers sort of floats above that fine textured foliage, and it is just spectacular. Now, it's not as exciting as pink muhly, that's Muhlenbergia capillaris. Our expert guest is going to talk about that because Muhlenbergia capillaris grows really well in the Southeast where she's from. Up north here, it is not as hardy for us. It doesn't necessarily make it through every winter. Muhlenbergia reverconii is much more dependable for colder climates, you know, and only down to zones 5. It really is not going to go to zone 4. But reverconii is quite reliably winter hardy for us. Another I learned a new vocabulary word. It is cespitose. It grows in clumps rather than spreading by rhizomes. This is a grass. It will stay where you put it. And so that makes it useful for designing in a garden. And another tip for siting it is that you want to put it somewhere where it will be backlit, either in the morning or in the afternoon, because once it goes to flower, sunlight coming through those seed heads or the flower inflorescence is just gorgeous. It seems to almost glow from the inside. Like I said, you're not going to get as intense a pink as other muhly grasses, but it's a nice soft color. And even when it starts to go to seed and it turns a more tawny color, it's that texture and that movement that I absolutely love. So I've been growing Undaunted, which is a selection from this species, for a couple of years. I put the new plants that my friend brought nearby so that I could compare them side by side and see really what the difference is between Undaunted and the straight species, which is the one that I now have.
I love the fact that there's a muhly grass that's hardy in some cooler zones, because when you go down south, I mean, I will never forget this experience of flying into the Charleston airport in South Carolina, and a lot of the airport plantings as you drive out of the airport has pink muhly grass, the capillaris that you were talking about, and it was like the sun was setting and the light was coming through it. And I don't know if you can have like an ethereal experience at an airport, but if you can, that was like close to what I experienced when I was driving out. And I was really tired, but it made an impression. So I love the fact that there's this option for those of us that are in slightly cooler conditions that we can get away with it. And zone 5, then, that's pretty cool. Sorry, zone 3 and 4, but that's pretty cool. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I can't wait to hear what the expert has to say about the warmer version of that grass. This will be exciting. All right. Well, I felt like this episode could not go through without mentioning a little bluestem. There's big blue stems and little blue stems, but I'm going to talk about Carousel little bluestem, which is a cultivar of Sisyrinchium, scoparium, Carousel, and that is zones 3 to 9. Here's the thing about little bluestem. It is found in every state, natively, it is found in every state of the lower 48 except Nevada. So Nevada, get it together, would you? Like, come on, you got to start growing this grass. let's introduce it. No, let's not do that. Oh God, all the native people are going to get on me. But it is very, very native for everybody, basically, who's listening to this podcast, except if you're in Nevada. It's 2 to 2.5 feet tall and wide. I like it because it's well behaved. We all stay away from miscanthus, obviously not a native grass. It's a huge monstrosity that takes over. It's invasive. It's got all these bad qualities of it. I feel like we were all introduced to ornamental grasses in the United States, in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was miscanthus. And it really left a bad impression with everybody, not only because it seeds all over the place, but it just gets so massive and so giant, and you have to divide it with a chainsaw. This is not that grass. This is a much better behaved grass, this little bluestem. And the cultivar Carousel was introduced by the Chicagoland Grows program. And I believe maybe about 10 years ago. It was quite a while ago. And I first saw this grass at Chicago Botanic Garden. Absolutely stunning. I saw it in fall because these blue-green blades really look like somebody lit them on fire. In the fall, this grass gets unbelievable color. It's kind of a purplish red burgundy color. And it fires up all the way from the base of the grass all the way up to where the inflorescences are, those little flowers and tufts. Full sun, well-drained soil, like most grasses. But this one, actually, little bluestem does tolerate clay soil, pollution, black walnuts. So you got those black walnut trees and you're worried about the jungleans. You can plant this underneath that. Lean soils, deer don't touch it. I mean, this is a toughie. This is a bomb-proof plant, as they say. As I mentioned, the foliage is a blue-green. I actually think that the foliage has kind of these little pink streaks if you look close enough at it. And I feel like that's just a little preview of what it's going to do later on in the season. You know, it's kind of giving you a little, oh, it's blushing almost, which I think is really, really cool. And then it transitions, like I said, into this reddish burgundy and eventually into copper in the fall. It's got showy white fluffy plumes in late fall. You know, this isn't, you know, this giant puff like you were just describing, but it's a stately grass. And I love that this is a non-flopper. You know, this is a grass that stands upright, does its little soldier-like position, doesn't get really flopsy mopsy, and you're just, it looks like a disastrous mess, like an elephant sat on it by the time you get to the end of the season. It stays firm, which I love. And yeah, the straight species, you can't really say that about the straight species. Carousel is well behaved, but the straight species will get 4x4. So that's considerably bigger, and it does flop a little bit. So I recommend this, you know, this selection of this native. So I guess it's technically a native R, Carousel. But yeah, grows great in my garden, East Coast, obviously. Was grown to perfection in Chicago when I've been out there and saw it for the first time. So I'm a big fan of Carousel Little Bluestem. And if you're looking for a well-behaved grass that's tough, this is it. Okie dokie pokey. What do you got up next, Carol?
Okay, this one is a little unusual. It is one that you do not see on many ornamental grasses lists, but I personally find it quite ornamental. And the name of this grass is purple top or purple top tridens or red top. It's got a lot of common names, but the botanical name is Tridens flavus. It is hardy from zones 4 to 9, and it's native to the eastern and central United States. It goes down into Mexico and even into South America, according to some sources. So huge native range. This is a grass that is often described, if you're looking at it from an agriculture perspective, it's a forage grass. So your cattle and horses will eat it. Okay. And it's quite nutritious. But it's a tall but not terribly, it doesn't have a huge presence. It won't take up a huge amount of space in your garden. So it gets 3 to 5 feet tall, 3 feet wide, but it's very airy. Mostly it's these tall stems that get the purple top on top. So the seeds and the flowers are purple and the top part of the stems are purple. And when you see it growing en masse, it almost looks like a purple cloud is floating above the grass. So it's tolerant, salt tolerant, heat tolerant, grows along roadsides. And that is how I got to know this plant. So there is, on my commute, when we used to commute to the office every day, now we're working from home, but on my commute between here and the office, there is a field which I believe either the conservation district or the town or somebody has been restoring it and adding native species back into it. And it's got lots and lots and lots of purple top. And so I would be driving to work and I would see the clouds of, purple seed heads. And I would think, what is that? What is it? And I actually more than once pulled over and cut some of it for use in bouquets, but also so that I could key it out and identify it. Nice. So in the field, like, it really blends in. For the first part of the summer, you don't even know it's there. It just looks like field grass. It's late summer when it goes into bloom, and it makes these drooping panicles. So it's sort of the the inflorescence is fan shaped, but the individual seeds are so heavy that once they break out of the fan, they droop, and so it's just got this like sort of cool shape. And those seeds are, like I said, they're good for cattle and horses. Birds will also eat them, like bobwhite quail and turkeys. If the seeds persist, and they will persist into the winter, is really quite a valuable food source for these native birds. And the other part, which I think is cool, if you're going for a nature sanctuary type thing in your garden, the foliage hosts many, many species of butterflies and moths. So yeah, it's got some ecological function to it as well. This is a lot of people would be scared to plant a field grass in their garden because they're afraid it's going to run and take over. This is a bunch grass, and so it will stay put, and it will make it keep the same footprint year after year. It's perennial, it will come back. And I think the only caveat that I say, it is pretty subtle. So it is not muhly grass. It's not like Black Hawk's big blue stem where you just go, whoa, look at that. It is pretty subtle. So if you're going to plant it, you probably need to plant it in groups of like at least 5 so that it, really shows up. But I think that it would make a great addition to a meadow type matrix, or, slip it in there with some other sort of higher impact plants that are similar height, and it just give you a little bit of extra texture and that fascinating cool color late in the season, and then the rest of the year is sort of like a background player to the other plants.
No, I love it. So Carol, did you end up collecting seed from the native meadow, and that's how you ended up with this grass, or was this something that you had to seek out and purchase?
So you can buy this. A lot of native plant nurseries carry it. You can buy it in, usually they sell it as a plug. It can be grown from seed. And so I needed a photograph of this plant. Let me just tell you, this is not a plant that photographs easily. And all the photos I was finding were like of single seed heads. So I went back to that field actually yesterday before this podcast taping. And I tried to shoot it in the field. What I ended up doing, I'll put both of these photos in the show notes. So I have it, as well as I could in the field. But then I picked a bunch of them and I sort of held the inflorescences up to the sky so that you can see the, silhouette.
Effect.
Yes. And I'm going to then collect those seeds and try growing them next year.
Nice.
Yeah, I think it comes quite readily from seed, so we'll see how it goes. I haven't tried growing a grass from seed yet.
That surprises me. You're such a seed starter. Wow. All right. So this is okay. Good question to ask, because I'm going, you must have grown this, but yeah, you have your sights set on it as being your first grass from seed. I love it. Well, all right. So we'll go from super rare or unusual grass to probably a grass that everybody knows, but I had to put it on the list. This was the PPA, Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year in 2014. It is a Roy Diblick plant breeding spectacular plant and if you know Roy Diblick, he is a king plantsman who's out in the Midwest and does a lot of plant breeding with grasses and ornamental grasses and native grasses. And this is Northwind switchgrass. So it's Panicum, Virginia. I'm looking at the species going, oh, I spelled that wrong. That's not what it is. Virgatum, as I put it, Northwind, and it's zones 4 to 9. It is native throughout the Midwest, native into part of Eastern North America too, but this is a Midwest grass. It is a nativar. It is touted in almost every single catalog online description as the unfloppable grass. Now, I was just talking about, Carousel little bluestem not being a flopper, but it's only 2 feet tall and wide. This is a 4x6 grass. This is a big boy. This gets 4 feet tall, up to 6 feet wide. So for a grass to be that big and not to flop, that is a feat of the universe. I mean, that is pretty impressive, because when you start getting super large in the ornamental grass range, these things tend to flop, regardless of whatever you do. You get a rainstorm, it flops over. But this is the unfloppable. I will say I've seen it flop. Okay, let's be honest. Like there are occasions when it does flop. A lot of the times that's because the soil's too fertile, because it does not want a fertile soil. It wants lean soil. Or you put it into not as much sun as it wants. So, this is not a partial shade grass. This is not something, this is a grass that needs full sun all day long to really get it to the point where it's not flopping. It's got this staunch, upright, vase-like habit, which I adore. That's a exclamation point, focal point plant if you've ever seen one. Like that, it's so tight, and it looks like somebody tied a rope around it, but they didn't. You don't need to do that for this grass. For years, I saw this grass, which I didn't know was this grass, planted outside a Verizon store in a mini mall near where I live. And I just watched this thing over and over again going, wow, that's a really beautiful grass. So one day I just pulled over and I started digging around at the bottom of the plant. I don't know what I was thinking I would find. It's not a botanic garden. They don't have it labeled. But I actually saw one of the old nursery tags was kind of buried at the base of one. Lucky break. And it was Northwind switchgrass. And from then on, I was like, I need this grass. So I got 2, I think, to begin with. Terrible. Don't get 2. Buy in 3s, odd numbers, people. But I got 2. And since then, I've divided it up and I've got a few masses of it throughout my garden. It's got wider blades, so maybe thumb-sized, width-wise blades that are in this gray-green color with a steely blue overlay to it. So really, the light really changes the composition and the hue of what these blades look like. It gets these golden, airy seed heads that kind of just dangle like little goldeny coins in the fall, which is just another beautiful aspect of it. I mean, we're talking about grasses, so they really put on a show the most in fall. And this guy, Panicum, the Northwind Panicum, really transitions to this kind of copper red in the fall. But it does it very inconsistently. So you'll have a patch of the grass will still be green, and then a patch will be kind of goldeny copper, and a patch of it will be red. And I dig that. I think that's really kind of cool. It doesn't go all at once. So if you're somebody who needs a consistency in your color change, this is not for you. Lasts upright for most of the winter. This is a grass that I don't cut back. And I know that there's a lot of not controversy, but a lot of people who feel differently, that they don't like it when, the grasses get snow on them, they break off, they're like tumbleweeds all over the garden. But I like leaving them upright, especially for the wildlife factor. The chickadees really go bananas over the seed heads of this. And then I even see them pulling out pieces of the grass when it's completely died back and it's that, kind of buff color that I assume that they are using for kind of insulation wherever they are hunkered down for the winter. And it really takes a lot for Northwind to succumb to snowfall, unless we're getting 2, 3, 4 feet of heavy dripping snow. This guy stands upright the entire time, which is so awesome. So yeah, I'm a big fan. It's a really, really tough grass. I feel like it's a good substitute for those who fell under the miscanthus spell for, decades ago and really wanted that big, beefy presence of a grass. But this is a great native alternative that's not invasive and won't seed all over the place. All right, Carol, bring it on home. Your 4th and final native grass that you adore.
Okay. All right. This one I think has been on the podcast before, but not by me. It is Blonde Ambition Gramma grass. That's Bouteloua gracilis, Blonde Ambition, super hardy from zones 3 to 10. Like a really big range where you can grow it. It is a sort of medium-sized, well, I would say sort of on the larger side. It can get 36 inches tall and wide. For me, it has never, ever gotten to 36 inches tall, though mine get about 2 feet tall and wide. And it grows in full sun to partial shade. It's going to flower better in full sun. And it is adaptable to a wide range of soils, from clay loam to sandy to, it's pretty adaptable soil-wise, although it does need well-drained soil. And it is native to the straight species is native to the western United States and northern and central Mexico. So this is another fine textured grass. It's another clumper, not a runner. And it blooms earlier than some of the other ones we've been talking to. It blooms in early summer. It is a warm season grass. It is late to emerge usually. So if you're thinking, oh, it's not going to come back this year, give it a chance. It probably will. But I had this one growing for, I would say, 5 years, and there was one spring where it did not come back, and I was so sad. I was so sad. But there must have been one survivor, because this year I had one come back. So I definitely, yeah, I know. I was like, it's like a miracle. So I weeded around it, and I made sure it had everything it needed, and hopefully it'll do a little better. But I need to get it some friends. So that's on my shopping list for this year. But it's just a beautiful, low care, drought tolerant plant. And the flowers and the seed heads are so unique. They come off from the stalk at a right angle sideways, like a pennant. And the texture, people describe it like eyelashes. It's just these little wispy, like blonde eyelashes. And to see it in a group, and the photo that I put in the show notes is from the New York Botanic Garden, where they planted it en masse, and it is spectacular. Just a cloud of these little fluttery eyelashes. I blame the voles for taking this out. So it's
I was just going to ask you, do you think it was like a winter wet situation? But I didn't know what you thought maybe took out your clump.
Yeah, it wasn't an unusually wet winter, although I think that could take it out if it wasn't in well-drained soil. My soil is basically like beach sand. So it's very well drained, but the voles love that part of the garden. So what I think happened is that the voles ate the crowns of all but one, evidently. So anyway, I don't know what I'm going to do about that, except plant more. Just keep planting more. The voles can't possibly eat it all.
I mean, knock on wood.
They could actually probably eat it all.
I love it. There's a couple of years ago, maybe 2 years ago now, we featured a newer cultivar from Brent Horvath out in the Midwest, who's an amazing plant breeder at Intrinsic Perennials. He has one, a Bouteloua that is honeycomb, I think he called it, where those little eyelashes are like a dirty blonde. They have like the little blonde eyelashes, but then it's almost like it's got like a little golden stripe, like somebody put on. It's an eyelash and eyeliner all in the same one. Very pretty cultivar of it, which I haven't seen in person, but in pictures it looked beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. What a cool grass. Yeah, that one's really neat, especially so odd, like 90 degrees, little baseball pennants coming off of that grass. Super cute.
It makes sense when you see it, but when you hear about it, you're like, it does what?
Yeah, no, that sounds weird. Oh, man. All right, so here's the thing. How do you feel about sea oats?
I love them.
Latifolium. Okay.
I love them, but I hear they're very seedy, like that they put out a lot of seed.
Yes. I've always loved them. I love them in other people's gardens. I love them in botanic gardens. This is a Southeastern native. I love the fact that, Chesmanthium as a group, as a genus, will take partial shade, which is kind of rare in the grass family. But I have always been really resistant because people say that it seeds obnoxiously. So this is I haven't grown it, but I really want to try it grass, which is river mist, northern sea oats, Chesmanthium latifolium, river mist, zones 5 to 8. This is sea oats, but it's variegated sea oats. So it is almost erring on the side of more white than green on its striped blades. It is, if you think about that, then being in the shade, holy macaroni, that thing glows like there's no tomorrow. Admittedly, I have only seen it in a botanic garden setting, a beautiful, beautiful clump of it that was just, dynamic. It allegedly, because it's a variegated plant, which tend to be less hardy, less aggressive, less obnoxious, which can be annoying because it takes a while for them to build up into anything. I think, wow, why not give that a try for sea oats, right? So if it does seed around, it won't be as much. So I really want to try this grass. Like I said, it's partial shade, moist, well-drained spot. I've already discussed those bright green and white, almost bamboo-like foliage to this grass. It's very notched out. It has these almost comb-like grass blades to it, which is very, very cool. And then in late summer, you get these silver, green, gray oats, like the green oats, like seed pods that dangle on these little wire stems in kind of this flourish of a feather off at the top of this grass. And they dangle like little coins, like little, off a chandelier, these little prisms, which are beautiful. I think in a shady location, this is a must-have plant. This is just such a cool plant. And it gets 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. I gotta say, it looks like the clump that I saw and witnessed in a Southeastern botanic garden. Looks like it had been there a long time, and it was maybe 2 by 1. So I'm guessing this takes a while. And from everything that I've read and researched, give this guy a chance. Like, it's going to take a while for it to establish itself and bulk up. But, with a species, with a genus and species, with sea oats, you're almost happy that it does that and it's not going to take over this whole environment. But I have to say, for every grass that has been on my list, which they are all exceptionally showy in their own way, this is the showstopper. This is the beauty that I'm really excited to try. And I really wanted to feature a Southeastern native too, because, we think of the Midwest mostly for native grasses and maybe a little bit of the Northeast, but the Southeast grass is pretty representative. And you got a Southeastern guest too, I believe, for this episode.
That is absolutely true. And I thought it would be fun to hear from the Southeast rather than someone from the Midwest, which would be kind of the expected place to go for a guest. For this topic, but yeah, so we have some Southeast native plants coming up.
All right, but first, I think we have Peter. So because everything sounds better with a British accent, let's see what Peter has to say about driving on I-95.
When the popularity of ornamental grasses began to pick up steam in the 1990s or thereabouts, I must admit I didn't get it. I know, I'm definitely not a dyed-in-the-wool horticulturalist, but I am a savvy gardener, and the incorporation of these weeds just didn't make sense to me. Don't I spend endless hours in the hot summer sun plucking out crabgrass from my otherwise pristine garden beds? Why on earth would I purposely plant grasses into my landscape? And my first thought was that some of these plant breeders must be high. Speaking of grass, right, But then I started seeing more and more of those diaphanous grasses incorporated into esteemed gardens like Sisyrinchium and Great Dixter, and my opinion began to change. These perennials added a bit of softness to landscapes I would have previously called rigid. One might say they have an almost ethereal or playful quality. Have you ever seen common cotton grass, a species native to English bog areas? When it produces its puffy white seed head, it looks as though an army of rabbits has just lost their tails. Charming? Yes. A good garden plant? Perhaps. In subsequent years, I've added my fair share of ornamental grasses to my garden here in the States. I have a few blue-eyed grasses, thanks for the recommendation, Danielle, and a few panicums as well. I stayed away from the flashy miscanthus because I learned they are thuggish and invasive, and my thanks to Carol for that word of warning. Occasionally when I'm driving down I-95 here on the East Coast, I see a puff of pink on the side of the highway and think, well, if you put that in a nursery pot, I bet it would sell like hotcakes. It's a fine line between a so-called weed and a garden-worthy plant. But I can attest to the fact that my landscape is more attractive with those roadside weeds in it. Just don't ask me to pronounce their botanical names.
That Peter, he's such a good sport. We give him a topic of native grasses. He still figures out how to say something witty.
That's right. He's just always witty, no matter what.
I think it comes with the English accent, honestly. Is that like something you're just born with? English accent means witty. Same thing. It's a trait. All right, let's roll into this much anticipated and much talked about expert testimony that we have. Let's see who our mystery guest from the Southeast is.
Hey there, everyone. Greetings from the outskirts of Charlotte, North Carolina. This is Paula Gross, co-author of the Southeast Native Plant Primer and former associate director of the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens. I'm gardening in Zone 8 in the Piedmont of the Carolinas, which means mostly clay, about 42 inches of rain a year that does not come evenly. As I'm looking out at the dogwoods changing color, I'm well aware that it hasn't rained here in over a month. But there's a few plants in my garden that have no problem with that. I bet you know where I'm going with this. Yep, it's the grasses, with an ES, as in ornamental, not the lawn. Boring. Not just ornamental, but native grasses, ones that are part and parcel of a healthy web of life. I love to see them blanketing the roadsides, backlit in the autumn light. I also admire how they take up space in bold, sweeping plantings in city parks. Native Southeastern grasses turn my head and lock my gaze. I mean, there's something truly mesmerizing about them this time of year. They have both power and grace. There is this wistfulness that they invoke as the wind rustles them and the light sparks off their airy inflorescences. They are as much of this season of autumn and all it stirs as the coloring falling leaves. And it's those textural and emotional qualities that I desire when I look into my own garden at this time of year. So let's get straight into some of my favorite species for the garden. I'm not going to bury the lead or save the best for last. I'm going straight to muhly grass, Muhlenbergia capillaris. Ah, yes, if you know this grass, you understand. Picture a divided road, the one with that narrow planting strip in the middle. Now imagine that potentially sterile strip overflowing with billowy pink clouds of light-catching airiness. It's pure magic. I bet you've seen it. Muhly grass is not too tall, 2 to 3 feet, and its ultra-thin blades make an attractive arching mound, and it can absolutely take the heat and the drought. In fact, its Achilles heel is too much moisture, especially in winter. And as a warm season grass, this one really does need to be planted in the spring rather than the fall, or in a pinch late summer. Its show starts in September and the color lasts through November when the airy plumes fade to a straw color. But don't cut them off or you'll miss the surprise on winter mornings when ice crystals light up the plumes as if from the inside. Come early March, you can cut back the foliage to 6 inches or so to allow clean new growth to form a new neat mound. In fact, all the grasses I'm highlighting perform best with a trim down in March. And like almost all of our native grasses, pink muhly is a full sun plant. There's a direct correlation between sun and bloom on this one, so don't fool yourself. If it's not in full sun, it's not going to impress. While pink muhly is a bit of a diva and can definitely hold the spotlight on its own, my next favorite grass is a team player, one of those plants that makes the plants around it shine. And I'm talking about little bluestem, Schizachyrium, scoparium. This is one of the classic prairie grasses, and it ranges across much of the U.S., all but the far west, and that accounts for its hardiness to zone 3. Little bluestem grows in clumps, rising 2 to 4 feet tall, depending on the cultivar, and has a subtle blue cast, often with highlights of mauve, and it's a beautiful foil for golds, pinks, and purples. One of my favorite combos is little bluestem, purple or pale coneflower, and aromatic aster. It just blends so naturally with native perennials and gives its best form when not overwatered or fertilized. It can grow in sun to part sun, but again, to avoid flopping, especially in partial sun, grow it lean. I've always liked the older cultivar, the blues, but there are nearly a dozen cultivars on the market, obviously a well-admired grass. Plant in clumps of at least 3. In late summer, the blue tones shift to amber and mahogany, and small, fluffy seed heads pop out along the stalk, catching the light. And this team player is not only lovely to look at, it's a nourishing part of your local food web. Little bluestem is a larval host plant to a handful of butterflies. And those fluffy little seed heads? Turns out the birds love them. Now, a close relative of bluestem, and one that is just beginning to find its way into gardens, is split-beard bluestem, Andropogon ternarius. And it's a charmer. Split-beard bluestem is a bit shorter, topping out at 3 feet, and strongly clumping. And while it has some subtle but attractive purplish tones to its narrow leaves, it's all about the seed heads for me. If little bluestem is dotted with light-catching whiskers, split-beard bluestem takes those whiskers and multiplies them by 2, branching and growing to reflect more light for an overall bigger show. Best in full sun, but part sun's all right, but hold off on the irrigation. And in my book, that's a plus. You're most likely to find the cultivar Black Mountain, and that was originally collected in its namesake town near Asheville. All right, something bigger. Love your grasses tall and bold? Skip miscanthus and look to panic grass, Panicum virgatum. This native grass has long been admired for its upright stature and multi-branch seed heads. There are dozens of cultivars that range from 3 to 8 feet tall, with blades from steely blue to burgundy streaked. Panicum's natural range is wide, and it's hardy to zone 4. It's perhaps the most versatile of all the native grasses, and not the least is it can remain upright under more pampered garden conditions of moisture and fertility, can be used to great effect in rain gardens. It's stellar in full sun, but holds up well in partial. And it's versatile in design as well. Many cultivars can hold their own in single clumps, and it is unparalleled as a bold, sweeping low screen. I especially want to give a shout out to red-leaf panicum. There are a handful of cultivars, Shenandoah, Ruby Ribbons, and the tongue-twisting Rotstraubusch, that give you deep red burgundy color throughout the growing season, intensifying in the fall. They provide that color contrast where needed and are perfectly perennial, unlike the non-native fountain grass. I'll leave you with some praise for tall, elegant Indian grass, Sorghastrum nutans. It makes a striking specimen in the full sun garden, but I think I love it most in its modern wilderness, the roadside. That is, where infrequently mowed roadsides can still be found. Can we bring them back, please? Look for Indian grass. It's tall, up to 7 feet, elegant and robust, with tints of blue to its foliage. It is topped by skinny, spear-straight, straw-colored inflorescences in late summer. As the days get shorter, those spikes relax open one by one to reveal showy yellow stamens dangling in the breeze. And when they catch the light, you'd think they were petals and not pollen. So if you've got a full sun-dry spot that can support the stature of Indian grass, then plant 5 or 6. To invoke the spirit of the prairies in your own garden through this native grass is a pleasure and a comfort like no other. So get out there and see what native grasses catch your gaze. Make a list, plant in spring, and you'll be catching light this time next fall.
Carol, I am so glad that you reached outside of our Midwestern comfort zone for grasses and got Paula to talk about some really interesting options.
Yes, including that muhly grass that we can't grow. And she sent some great photos too. So if you're not watching and just listening, check out the photos that Paula sent. They'll be in the show notes along with the photos that Danielle and I posted.
That's right. Go to finegardening.com, hit that tab up at the top that says podcast. All right. Time for us to save our voices for the next episode, Carol.
Yes. All right. We'll see you next time.